Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Do any of you enjoy traveling? And when you check into a hotel, how often do you think about the room itself? Who stayed in it before you? What kind of lives have passed through it? I'll admit, it's always on my mind whenever I check into a new hotel. Not the most relaxing mindset for travel, I know, but I can't help wondering, did anything tragic ever happen here? Tonight's story is one that's been floating around the web for a bit. It takes us to Fukuoka, Japan, where a Hong Kong family checked into a hotel and had a terrifying encounter that might just make you think twice the next time you settle into your own room. And as always, at the end of this story, I'll share my own interpretations from a Chinese cultural perspective. So stick around if you're curious about that. All right, let's turn on the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. The story was shared by a man in Hong Kong. Let's call him Robert. Robert lived in a modest apartment with his wife, their young son, and his elderly mother. Both he and his wife worked during the day, so his mom helped to raise their young child during the day. They were a really tight-knit family, the kind who always tried to take at least one overseas trip together every year. Travel for Robert and his family was never just about sightseeing. It was a way for them to step out of the daily grind, to sit down for meals together without rushing, to give his mother memories she could hold on to while she was still healthy enough to join them. You see, growing up, Robert barely traveled at all. His father wasn't in the picture. His mother had raised them all by herself in a cramped public housing estate in Hong Kong. Money was always tight. Vacations back then were a luxury that they could never afford. He's actually never taken a vacation in his life until he was an adult and started making his own money. Now that Robert was older with a steady job and his own family, he swore things would be different. Every trip he took, he promised himself his mom would be there. Each journey was a way to repay her for everything she sacrificed to raise him, to give her experiences. She's been denied all these years, while all she did was work as a janitor at a shopping center. So when the family planned their trip to Japan, Robert insisted that she come along. Fukuoka was the destination, a city famous for its food, its slower pace, and its family-friendly atmosphere. Perfect place for a few days of rest and relaxation. They booked a hotel room big enough for all four of them, Robert, his wife, their little boy, and his mother. Just like at home, they would all be under the same roof, ending each day together. At least that was the plan, because what unfolded in that room would leave Robert unsettled long after they returned home. An experience that turned an ordinary family holiday into something he would never forget. Since this was their annual family trip, Robert decided to splurge a little to spoil everyone. Instead of the budget hotels they were used to, booked a 5-star hotel for a few nights. They would stay there for a few nights before moving on to cheaper hotels for the rest of their stay. It was a stretch for their budget, but he figured why not? His mom deserved it. His wife deserved it. And even his young son should have new core memories of comfort, luxury, and family. When they first entered the room, everything looked perfect. 2 large double beds made up neatly with crisp white sheets, bright lighting overhead, a bathroom that looked absolutely spotless, gleaming like it had just been cleaned. On the surface, it felt worth the money, but almost right away, all of them noticed something was off. A foul smell. It wasn't overwhelming at first, just a faint, unpleasant odor that lingered in the air, clinging to the air. No matter how much they tried to ignore it, they spent a few minutes trying to figure out where the smell was coming from. It wasn't the garbage bin. It wasn't the bathroom. Robert even crouched down, sniffing near the air vents, thinking maybe the filters were overdue for a change. The best way to describe it, it was like that damp smell you get when a towel or piece of clothing never dries properly. You hang it up, you think it's fine, but instead of that fresh, clean scent, it leaves behind this sour, almost pungent odor. Robert thought maybe it was also the air conditioning. The filters probably needed to be cleaned. His wife assumed it might be the cleaning rag that the housekeepers used to wipe the room down with. His mother didn't say much, though. Robert noticed her brow burst slightly, as if the smell reminded her of something she couldn't quite place. No matter how spotless the room looked, something about that odor made the space feel less welcoming. After a few more minutes of searching and coming up empty, they gave up. It wasn't like the smell was unbearable, but in a 5-star hotel, you noticed these things. Robert finally picked up the phone and called the front desk. He explained the situation politely and asked if there was any possibility of moving to another room. The staff apologized right away, their tone professional. They understood, they said, but unfortunately, it was peak season. Every other room was already occupied. There was nothing they could offer him except to bring up a few air fresheners if he wanted them. Robert politely declined and hung up, disappointed but not surprised. Japan in the summer is always busy. It wasn't like they could just walk out and find another hotel, not with his mother and young son in tow. So they decided to make the best of it to impact what they needed, tried to ignore the damp odor, and went on with their day. That night, after a long day out, they returned to the hotel. Dinner had been fun. They went to a conveyor belt sushi spot nearby, the kind where the plates kept rolling past and you just grab what you want. The mood had been light, everyone laughing, their bellies full. When they got back to the room, things quieted down. They took turns using the shower. Robert lay back on one of the beds, half watching the TV, half scrolling through his phone. His wife was in the shower, the sound of running water looming steadily behind the bathroom door. On the other bed, his mother was playing with his son. She was smiling, moving a small toy truck back and forth with him, keeping him entertained while he giggled and clapped. While they played, the boy lost his grip, and the toy truck rolled across the blanket, bounced off the side, and disappeared into the shadows under the bed. The boy immediately reached down, pointing, "Truck! Truck!" Robert's mother gave him a reassuring pat, then leaned forward, slowly lowering herself to check under the bed. And that's when the mood shifted. Grandma bent down to help, with one hand on her knee for support, used the other to lift the edge of the bedspread, peering into the darkness beneath. That's when it hit them. Vessel. It grew stronger instantly, wafting out from under the bed in a way that made Robert wrinkle his nose. It wasn't just the faint dampness they had noticed earlier. This was sharper, heavier, like the smell of damp clothes mixed with the odor of rotten meat. Robert looked up from his phone, uneasy. He saw his mother frozen there for a moment, her eyes fixed on the space below the bed. "Ma, you okay?" he asked, swinging his legs over the side. He started to stand, ready to come over to help her find the toy truck. But before he could take a step closer, his mother let the bedspread drop back into place. Her voice came out sharper than usual, firm in a way that made Robert pause. "Moya, Moya, nothing's there," she snapped, waving him back. "Don't come over." He continued trying to come over to check, but she scolded him harshly with unusual firmness. "I said, there's nothing. Leave it. We'll get him a new toy." Robert blinked, caught off guard. His mother almost never raised her voice at him. She sounded shaken, though she wastering hard to hide it. For a moment the room was silent, except for the muffled sound of the shower running behind the bathroom door. Robert sat there staring at her, the unease in his chest tightening. He didn't want to push her, but deep down, he knew something wasn't right. She insisted on sleeping on that bed herself, the very one she had just peeked beneath. Robert didn't like it. Something in her tone, the way she had snapped at him, told him she wasn't being honest with him, but she was his mother, and she was stubborn, so he let it go for now. That night, Robert, his wife, and their son crowded under one bed. His mother laid down alone on the other. Robert tried to distract himself with the television again. His mind kept circling back. The room wasn't that big. How could a toy truck just vanish like that into thin air? He checked the floor. He checked around the edges. Nothing. And his mother's reaction when he wanted to look under the bed. It wasn't normal. She had looked right at something before dropping the covers again. He was sure of it. What did she see that she doesn't want to talk about? The odor still lingered faintly in the air. That damp, pungent smell. No matter how much his wife sprayed her perfume to mask it, it clung stubbornly, like it was coming from deep inside the room itself. Robert laid awake far longer than Hemingway, staring at the ceiling. Something about this place was wrong, and by the time the truth came out, he would wish he had pressed his mother that very first night. For 2 nights, they stayed in that room. Each night, no matter what they did, that odor persisted. They tried running the air conditioner, spraying perfume, even leaving the bathroom vent on all night. But the smell was always there, hanging in the air like a warning. By the time they checked out, Robert's mother was in bad shape. Her skin looked pale, her body weak. She complained of dizziness and nausea. On the way to their next destination, she began vomiting, and Robert had to rush her to a local hospital in Fukuoka. The doctor said it looked like some kind of infection or heat exhaustion, but Robert couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to that room. They cut the trip short. Once she was stable enough to fly, the family brought her back to Hong Kong. Even then, she was bedridden for days, shivering with a fever, unable to keep food down. It was only after she began to recover, when she was finally strong enough to speak more, that she admitted the truth. Robert sat at her bedside, asking her again and again what had taken place in that hotel, why she had reacted so strongly, why she had insisted on sleeping on that bed. And she finally told him that night. When she lifted the bedspread, Robert's mother had seen something that wasn't meant to be seen. Curled up in the shadows beneath the bed was a small child. Its skin was pale, drenched as if it was just pulled out of the water, hair plastered on its forehead, and in its tiny hand was a missing toy car. The child looked straight at her, and then it smiled. Not the kind of innocent smile you would expect from a child. Something off-stretched, just a little too wide. The eyes fixed on her as though it had been waiting. Slowly, deliberate, it began crawling forward, inching out from under the bed. In that moment, instinct took over. Terrified, she dropped the bedspread back down, snapping it shut like a curtain, and forced herself to act as if nothing had happened. She told Robert there was nothing there. She insisted on sleeping on that bed herself, shouldering that fear alone, and said no more about it, fearing that it will ruin everyone's vacation that was already fully paid for. Hearing his mother's confession, Robert finally pieced everything together. Why the toy had vanished, why that damp, rotten smell never left, and why his mother had insisted on taking the bed for herself. She had carried the weight of that fear in silence, and afterwards she carried that sickness in her body for 2 full weeks, only recovering after visiting a spiritual master back in Hong Kong who helped cleanse her of lingering energy. So what do you think happened here? Who is this mysterious child under the bed? Was it the ghost of someone who had once died in that room? An accidental drowning that the hotel kept quiet? Or was it simply a wandering spirit that found shelter beneath the bed? Please pause the video here and let us know what you think in the comments below.